We are back on MorningLine. We are talking the Tennessee Innocence Project. Jessica Van Dyke and John Gichner are with us. Jason Gichner. I apologize. Thank you for correcting me. My mistake. Jason Gichner, he is senior legal counsel. She's the executive director and lead counsel. Okay, you kind of touched on how cases come to you and the research process. Some of these cases can be more current. Some go back. The farther back it goes, the more difficult it goes, correct?
Generally speaking, because we've got to find the evidence.
Yeah.
We've got to find the records. And there's no requirement, especially if something wasn't admitted at trial or isn't part of the appellate record, there's really no parameters for how long a local agency would have to keep those records.
And I know things have changed with DNA and advances to where we are today, but do you tend to think that the cases you handle are convictions which were based more on circumstantial evidence than physical evidence? And maybe you can explain the difference to the viewers. I certainly know it from our trials. I've seen people convicted of murder on circumstantial evidence. But I don't know. I would just think that there's a better chance you're going to get a reversal on a circumstantial case than if there's DNA. Hey, come on, what are you going to argue here?
Sure. And a lot of the older cases, particularly that we look at, before there was DNA testing, it's a lot of people getting convicted on eyewitness testimony or someone picking somebody out of a lineup, or sometimes it really is just circumstantial where there's no direct evidence that the person committed the crime. But if you look at all the surrounding factors and you add them all together, it kind of makes sense. What I will tell you is that most of the time when we see wrongful convictions, it's sort of a perfect storm of events that happens. It's usually not just one thing. So sometimes it's they got the medicine wrong, sometimes they got the science wrong, but it's usually they got the science wrong. There was a piece of evidence that was not turned over that should have been turned over. You have an identification that go back and look at it and is suspect. It's rarely one individual reason why somebody is wrongfully convicted. I think what we tend to see is that all of these things come together at once and it goes badly.
How often does it come into play incompetent legal counsel for the defense?
So approximately 25% of those wrongful convictions that I referenced, of the 2,900, 25% of them had inadequate legal defense.
Oh, okay.
And we find that to be, that is something that happens pretty frequently.
1/4. What would qualify as inadequate legal defense? They're not objecting when they should. They're not calling the right witnesses. They're really just not taking the case seriously.
They don't call alibi witnesses. They don't give a thorough cross-examination. Maybe the prosecution has expert witnesses and the defense attorney doesn't bother to get any expert witnesses to see if those experts, I wouldn't know if a radiologist testifies at trial, right? I'm not a radiologist. I don't know if what they're telling me is accurate. I need a radiologist to help me understand the expert testimony. So maybe they don't get those expert witnesses. Maybe they don't investigate the case. They don't go out and look at the crime scene. They don't pull the files. They don't make the request for discovery material. So there could be any number of reasons why a defense attorneys have a lot of tasks to really zealously defend somebody. And if something, if they miss one thing, you put it together with these other factors like Jason mentioned, and you kind of have the perfect storm.
Is there a percentage for prosecutorial misconduct that might lead to a conviction? Because you said 25% on incompetence for the defense. Prosecutors, whether they're just incompetent or unscrupulous?
Well, the statistic from the National Registry of Exonerations is 54% of official misconduct, and that includes law enforcement and prosecutors are lumped into that number.
And when you say is that willful or is that incompetent misconduct? Do we know? Because to me, willful's even worse. If you're just stupid and you're not doing your job well, that's bad. But if you are smart and I'm going to still get this guy one way or the other and I'm going to make it happen, that's horrible.
Look, I really want to believe that people are not out there prosecuting and convicting people when they have a doubt about their innocence or guilt. I want to believe that when mistakes are made, it's just because that they made mistakes. But truth be told is that there are circumstances where I believe people are prosecuted because the prosecutor believes somebody is guilty and they color outside the lines in terms of their ethical obligations.
Well, we know prosecutors are elected, and these high-profile cases where you have the public sentiment one way or the other, how the public is, oh, you did it, and that can come into play when you're thinking about your reelection.
I suspect it can. Honestly, I don't know that we're the ones that are qualified to know that. What we do is we go back and look. If we think somebody was wrongfully convicted, why it happened, I love those questions, and I always want people to go back and do the analysis afterwards, like, why is it that this happened? But honestly, when we're in the trenches trying to figuring it out, it's really just about, is this person innocent? How can we prove it? And then, we can go back and Monday morning quarterback it later.
Before this show started, Jessica, I was just mentioning, and I know you don't go into detail on any of your active cases, but the Joyce, is it Watson and Charles Dunn case?
Joyce Watkins.
Watkins and Charles Dunn case. That one's interesting that you're still pursuing. You just recently argued. The point being, it dated back a long time, and Joyce is out on, she's served her time, and she's out after serving more than a couple decades, and Dunn is dead, but you still pursue it. Talk about why.
So when someone's wrongfully convicted, it can have collateral consequences. I'm sure you've talked about collateral consequences before with other guests.
Sure.
And so if you are convicted of a sex offense, you could be on the sex offender registry for the remainder of your life. You are labeled a felon. You may have other labels that are put on you. And to give people dignity, to clear their names of something that they did not do, is one, it's a privilege for us. But it has true meaning for people. I think Jason said this in court a couple weeks ago. We can't give them back the 27 years that was taken from them. But giving them dignity, hearing what went wrong, and I think that for the systemic picture, it's identifying where it went wrong and how do we, one, identify patterns and practices that we could then use to exonerate other people, but also to fix the problem in the future.
Keep it from happening again.
How do we fix this?
Right, and not just for Joyce, who's still alive, but I would think for Dunn's family.
Well, and I mean
that was a horrible crime, right? Just was it a child?
Yeah. But I mean, think about this, Nick. I mean, Charlie's family was all in the courtroom when we argued that hearing.
Okay.
I mean,
that's important.
His kids were teenagers when he went to prison. He has children and grandchildren that grew up with their dad and their granddad being falsely accused of a murder he didn't commit. I mean, that's devastating, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, and even them, maybe at that point, and maybe some family members take what the court says. They might have believed he did it until you guys came forward. Some of them might have.
Well, it was not until the new scientific evidence that has come out in that case where people have really started to learn about the things that went wrong and the truth of what happened to these folks.
Yeah, it's super important.
And I mean, this is a family that deserves for the public to know that their father and their grandfather didn't do the things that he went to prison for. They deserve that. No question. Listen, we just have a minute or so left before we wrap it up. If someone's watching and has a thought about a case or wants to reach out, I know you hear from a lot, but how do they do that? So the best way that especially we have people write for family members, the best way is we have the first part of our application on our website. Okay. And it's tninnocence.org. Okay. tninnocence.org, Tennessee Innocence Project. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. And we get a lot of calls. We do everything by mail, and that's because a lot of the people we're helping, we want to provide an equal footing for everyone. And a lot of the people that we're trying to help are in prison. They can't call, they can't get on the internet, right? And so we do everything in the mail, and we review every single application that comes to our office. Really? Absolutely. That is awesome. I mean, and so go online, fill that out. Yeah, I guess you have to provide the basic information and contact along those lines, and then you look at it and see where you go moving forward from there. Absolutely. And talk about this stuff. Even if you don't call us, it's really important that folks know that this is an issue in Tennessee and know that there are people that need help. And the best way that word gets out is not from us, really. It's people hearing about this and talking about it with their friends, talking about it with their families, letting them know that wrongful conviction is a real problem in the state of Tennessee. And us publicizing not only shows like this, but the cases when you have them. They make news, and it's important people see that. By the way, if people want to support your organization, they can go to the website and make donations there as well. Exactly. Which that's how you survive, right? Which is crucial. So I think it's definitely something worth supporting. Thank you both for coming on this morning. Thank you for having us. Well, really darn interesting. I mean, I want to follow more of these cases moving forward with you, but thank you again for the work that you do. I think it's super important, very, very important. We'll talk again. Great. Take a break. Back with another guest right after this. Stay with us.